Hey everyone, Gregory Hart here, and this is the Heart to Heart Podcast. This is episode 3. This week, I get to sit down with a very influential, touching, and overall amazing guy who taught at Glendale for a very long time. I'm here with Mr. Scott Gooding. How are you, Scott?
I'm great, Greg. How are you?
Good. I'm
Good.
very happy to be able to sit down and talk to you. I haven't seen you in many, many years. Obviously, with now me not living in Tillsonburg and not being as associated with that community. But now that I've touched base with you, I've seen a lot of the stuff you post on Facebook, and I've noticed that you retired. This is your first year off. I want to hear more about that for sure.
Yeah. It obviously is a crazy year to have retired with regards to lots of things. I mean, my own personal piece to it in terms of not having being with the students and when I was retired and all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. They had a I mean, they were in worse shape than I was. The poor kids were, and so I'm not going to cry over spilled milk on that. And certainly was lucky and had lots of great messages from people all over Facebook and Instagram, and even cards and letters and so on. But it has been, for me, a really interesting ride because it has given me, starting with COVID and being off on March break and then into my retirement, it's really gave me a focus of fitness for myself. So it's a more of a personal fitness journey that I've been able to, because of the time factor, right? So I've probably put myself in the best physical condition that I have been in probably 30 years, which is great. So that's that I'm liking with retirement. Certainly stress, I think also that you don't have to deal with anymore helps in that too.
Yeah, definitely. You got to take advantage of retiring. And I was going to say that right away. At first I had to take a second glance because you look amazing. Like you've obviously lost a significant amount of weight. I don't know if you want to go into depth with that, but I definitely noticed a difference the second you came on. One of the things I definitely wanted to touch base with is, do you think it was, obviously I think there's going to be aspects of both, but do you think it was easier or harder to had your retirement start due to COVID? Or do you think it was like, obviously I think there's pros and cons to both with this crazy of a year. Um, I don't know if you'd really want to have to be teaching or giving guidance through a laptop. I think just like you touched on, I think it's very hard for the kids, but what's your opinion on it? Are you think this is a better aspect for you to be able to leave, or do you think that this makes it a lot harder?
Well, that's a good point. I think in some ways, if you had to have it the way it is, it probably was the best because at least I got, 2/3 of the year in regular school. I was able to coach my last year of high school girls hockey. Um, so that, whereas that would never have happened this school year, no matter what. Um, and who knows where we're going as far as down the road, at least for this school year. I think that obviously the future looks brighter down the road with vaccines and so on, but we're still quite a ways away from that. So in that sense, I would say it's been easier, certainly harder in that it wasn't something I planned for. In your mind, I think when you retire, whatever you're doing, I think you think about kind of what it's going to be like at the end, when you're, um, an example would be usually the retiring teachers are uh, honored sort of in the Rose Assembly at the end of the year when there's lots of other activities. And that was something that I certainly look forward to having been through many over my years and seeing many great people retire. So, I mean, in that sense, it was disappointing. But once again, that's me. The real thing was for the kids, and so as much as it was disappointing for me, I think it was much more disappointing for them because in that assembly is also we honor the grads as well. So
I think you're right there, and it's very nice to hear you say, because it's not a lot of the stuff that people are thinking about right now is not being able to work, not being able to go to a restaurant, not being able to go to a concert, but you really don't ever sit down and think about all these kids that high school was a very good time in my life, and for a lot of people it's some of the best years of their life,
yeah,
and to have it cut short, to now be sitting in front of a laptop for 6 hours a day, and especially for those kids that didn't get a prom or a graduation or the experience of walking out on that last day of school, like I'm out. I'm like, at that point when I was in grade 12, I was like, I'm free. I can do whatever I want now. I'm not stuck inside all day. And I think you hit the nail on the head there with that for sure. I like your aspect of being at home, being able to take care of yourself and put more time into yourself that you couldn't before, because obviously you were at school from Monday to Friday, and you probably put in a lot of hours on the weekends too with all the stuff that you had to take care of. Um, what I've heard over the years, a lot more now that I was doing this, I reached out to a lot of people to ask their opinions of you. Um, and I've
Uh-oh.
never, sorry.
I said, uh-oh.
No, it's very good things. I reached out to my sister Hillary Hart, who you obviously
Mhm.
had. A lot of teachers
Okay.
had her, and they were a lot happier having her than they were having me. That's for sure. But I
Too
talked
hard
to
on
her.
yourself.
Yeah, I did talk to her, and she has a lot of fond memories of the funny things you would say and the way you would cheer her up and the way that you'd keep her going and keep her motivated. And that's one student over you were there for 36 years, or was it 35?
36 years teaching, 34 at Glendale.
Wow, that's an impressive career. Were you in Tilsonburg at a school before that?
So the first 2 years I was a supply teacher until
Okay.
I did 3 months actually in a grade 6 class at a school called East Oxford, which is outside of Woodstock in the country. So from there is where I got hired in the fall to come to Glendale in 1986. So
You
um,
definitely put your time in at that school. One of the things that my sister had told me was that she came for you to you for guidance, and I believe it was grade 11, and she couldn't decide whether or not she wanted to be a dental hygienist or a lawyer. It was a lawyer, and she said you
mhm.
looked at her and said you should be a lawyer for dental hygienists, and she laughed. Like I don't remember her actually coming home and telling my dad about it, but she's told me the stories about when she came home and told her that, and
Yeah,
it always made her laugh. And it's one of those things that you knew we were all in high school. You knew there was a lot going through our head. Some people's minds were a little more made up of what they wanted to do than other people's were. And that's
right.
that's that's you to a T. You made things fun. You were energetic. You were always the biggest spirit person at the school when it came to any of the events or festivals. Or I do remember when we had to dress up in our house colors.
Yeah.
And I remember asking Hillary if she had one question to ask you, what would it be? And her answer was, "What was your favorite house color?" So,
White.
which one is your favorite house color?
Well, I'm supposed to be impartial,
Yeah,
but I am a White House guy and have been right from the beginning.
yeah. I do. The one of my favorite things about like now adding you on Facebook is I was looking through some of your memories and some of your different posts, and I noticed that you take pictures of the yearbook and post them onto your photos on your Facebook, and it was a big flashback because I don't have my yearbook and I didn't see Hillary's yearbook. And I'm scrolling through the pictures and I'm seeing all these people that I used to know and used to talk to on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and the different activities that we were involved in. And I actually found a picture of Hillary when she had like blonde streaks in her hair. So I screenshotted that one real quick, and I've been trying to hold that one against her for a little while
Oh,
now. But one of the things I did notice is that you were involved in, like, was there a sport at Glendale that you weren't involved in?
well, I didn't coach basketball and volleyball, but I mean, I certainly, I, my opinion in terms of being a teacher and being involved in a school is you need to really immerse yourself in the school and whatever that is, be part of it and I would try pretty much every year to try to get to at least one game or concert or whatever of any of the activities that were going on, because I think that was important. It's important to show the kids that you are invested in them and care about them. And I think what that does is being involved myself in house council and other teams, like I coach both girls and boys hockey teams and girls ringette team. Um, in that if you go to their sports or there's activities, hopefully those students will come to yours. And I think that's important when it's, as a community to support each other.
That's a very, very good way of looking at it. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone's explanation of teaching be as dedicated to realizing that if they see you attend their activities, that you're going to attend theirs, which I think is that's a really good way of putting it, because you never really think about it that much, but you definitely notice who's there. You definitely know who's involved in what, and if they got an impression by you or they really enjoyed being around you, they'd want to join into the other events that you're a part of.
Right, exactly.
One of the things I noticed is there was a Glendale gymnastics team. Is this a Glendale one, or is this where you went to high school?
That was me from high school. So that was Delhi. But Glendale did have gymnastics. They did. It was I don't think that actually going way back, there used to be a girls gymnastics team. So I'm thinking we're talking probably 60s and 70s. There I don't think there really was anything on team wise when I first started. But what we did have was, which was really amazing and probably one of the greatest things that Glendale had. And unfortunately, with liability, it was stopped. But they used to have what they called the gymnastics assembly. And it was the phys ed teachers, Mr. Makovic, Mr. Robinson, were the male teachers, and Miss Ranovich and so on, is that they would have everybody who took phys ed would be involved in that gymnastics assembly in some form. So they might be doing setup or whatever, but oftentimes it was kids that often were not involved in other things, but maybe found a little niche in there. And I'll give you an example. There's things called in gymnastics, something called the pommel horse. I don't know if you know what it is. It's kind of like a you can take the handles off and they use it to do vaulting over, but it has handles on it. It's a very hard apparatus to do. You have to be really strong, but often it's your body weight shouldn't be that much as well, because you do have to some quick movement. So oftentimes you would get kids who were not involved at all in anything, and they do awesome in it because it's just something that they ended up doing well in and could do it. And they didn't do anything else in school, and it was the whole school was there, and it was everybody loved it. There was music to it, and it was like a team they were as well. So yeah, it was really cool. And unfortunately, gymnastics really was basically taken out of the schools. I don't know now, maybe 15 years ago, because of, understandably so to some extent, the liability with things like trampolines, and some of the other things. You have to have somebody who, in my case, when that picture you're talking about is that there was a coach, and he was a very educated coach in gymnastics, so he knew how to make sure things were safe. And so did the teachers that we had at the time, but I think that was changing, right? So
Yeah, I was going to touch base on that. With having a 36-year career, you obviously saw a lot of changes in the school system. One of them definitely had to be the liability aspect and how much things have changed. Like, I'm not putting an age on it, but there had to have been a time, I've seen it in movies, where you could smoke in school or smoke in at least the teacher's lounge. Like, you got to see such a big generation change from everyone, like from gymnastics in a gymnasium to
yeah,
everyone walks around with a cell phone now and can capture anything at any moment, which obviously puts a bigger liability on everyone there.
right.
Do you think that we've come in a good direction over time? Like, obviously I think there's pros and cons to that question. I'm not trying to make it a loaded question for you to say anything bad about the school system, because obviously
Mhm.
everyone has their opinions, but we've changed a lot over the years, and I think there's a lot of pros and cons. I just wanted to get your opinion on where we are now and where we were.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know that I was involved in House Council all the way from my first year, so 35 years ago now, but 34 years myself. And the activities that we did and were allowed to do then versus what we were allowed to do the last couple of years were, like, you couldn't do some of them. It's just and there were some cases, there were reasons for it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
there were some things that we did probably that were probably not thought out very well, and some of that, unfortunately, in our case, we didn't have anybody hurt or injured or anything like that, but obviously that did happen. I think unfortunately it's gone overboard though to some extent. I realize that we do want to make sure kids are safe and activities are safe and so on, but there's been some situations that I've seen that are gone way over, like something that is not even remotely going to happen, and you're not allowed to do it. So I think that this pendulum needs to swing back a bit. Whether it will or not, I don't know. But it and other things too. I mean, in the schools itself, like school trips and so on, you used to be able to do a lot more different things than you can now. And of course, the paperwork involved in terms of going on a trip. I mean, classes used to go, and let's say you were in a geography class and say, okay, let's go today. We're just going to go down to Participa Park. Well, now to do that, you would have to make sure that you've got the paperwork done like weeks in advance so they can get signed and approved and so on. So, and again, some of that is because of liability, which I understand, but it also takes away from some of the ability to do some really neat things.
That's a good point. The whole time you were talking about that, my opinion was, and my opinion on the school system right now as it is, I don't see it as much as you do. I remember when I was there, and I remember hearing the stories of when my parents went to high school, and it is a dramatic difference. There is a lot of things that were good that it changed, but I do believe as well that there is a lot that is being taken away from it that are real life experiences, that are experiences that maybe kids don't need to be as sheltered for certain stuff. And they're missing out on certain opportunities because of that. Like, just like you said, like Participa Park is such a good example to just get outside and get out of the classroom and have that experience with your friends where you're not at the school anymore. Like, you're having fun, like outside of those walls. It is a different experience. Like, I remember the experience being on class trips, and I know how big of a difference of feeling it was talking to those same people that you only see at school come out of their shell or be a different person when they were taken off the property. And that's a very good point. When I go back to the gymnastics aspect, one thing that you had said was it does bring a lot of people that maybe didn't look at themselves in the light of other sports to do it. And the first thing that came to my mind was I remember playing hockey with some people who did gymnastics as kids, and they walked circles around the people who hadn't. But when I was that young, I think gymnastics got a different look on it than it should have. It shouldn't have been looked as a weak thing to do or a less manly thing to do, because it created some really strong people. And one person I can think of specifically was Brett Parsons. I remember hearing that he took
Yep.
gymnastics, and that
Yep.
kid was I think he still is a crazy good hockey player. Like, I once
Yep.
watched the kid do a backflip on skates. Like, I think that there was a lot of things that came from that aspect, but it just made me think of the fact that they could do that in school and it wasn't taken away from them. I just wanted to touch on it, but I do think that the kids have been sheltered quite a bit with all the regulations that have come in.
Yeah, and I guess it's I don't know whether it's going back. I'm guessing no, but who knows?
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to touch base on, because I was asking you how many sports that you were involved in. SummerSlam. I don't know why I don't remember this. It had to have been in my year of 2013 when I graduated, or throughout those years. Did it not? Like, or was that taken away earlier?
No, it's only the only time we didn't have SummerSlam was like last year and the year before. So no, it would have been. It was usually the end of May or early June. It was an afternoon. I'm just trying to think if you would have had. I think you probably. I can't remember. We used to be able to rent inflatables, things like bungee run and so on, that kind of stuff. We had the sumo wrestling suits and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But again, going back to our previous discussion, that was a disallowed because of liability. They wouldn't let us do it anymore. So the so those were some of the things we had. Like, it went back probably almost to the beginning of my teaching. Used to, before that, it was called House Fair. So the idea was to have it sort of like a carnival type thing. So you'd have games like that as well. There used to water activities we'd have in for it, because it was hopefully warm day. That was what we were planning on, so that we could have different things like that. So
Yeah.
usually had a car show
Okay.
involved. We had things like Smash a Car, for like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving brought an old car in, and
Oh,
you could
nice.
you could put $2 or $5 and a sledgehammer and smack a car and so on. So there was that kind of stuff. We had one of my first years, it was called Tug a Car, which was one that probably should have never happened. It was a tug of war rope was tied to a car, and then the kids would pull it to see who could pull the cars for the furthest distance in the shortest period of time. And so that one was probably not as safe as what we should have had. And again, I think it was one of my first years, and I was the one of the first year teachers, so I was put in the car, and the brakes weren't working so well, so it was rather frightening. And we didn't have it again after that, so it was like, oh, I think this was one we shouldn't have had.
Yeah, that definitely brings to light some of the ones that there's a good reason that there's a rule put in place, or that at least there's a reason to why the rule has been put into place.
Yeah, exactly.
With SummerSlam, like, I don't know why, like, I must have been one of the kids that went home, and
Greg, I think you were.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you know what? It sucks because a lot of the things that happened in high school, you don't realize how much you would appreciate it now.
Yeah.
Like,
the problem is, I think, is that exactly what you're saying is that I think that high school is what it is, and it is, I mean, everything is what it is in terms of that peer thing, right? So if peers aren't going, if your peers are going, then you're likely to go. If your peers are not going, then you're likely not to go. The thing is, if you did go, you would find out whether or not there was a reason why you didn't go. Like if you went, you might give yourself a chance and have fun, and it's something that you did well. I'm not saying you in particular, but students, I think that's a struggle that we always have with teachers and kids who are trying to do activities for students in schools, is that we want to give them opportunities, but sometimes it's hard to get them there. If you can get them there, and I think and then give it a chance. The problem is sometimes they, like opening house assembly, you probably remember, always a lot of fun, but sometimes kids don't give it a chance either, right? Like they don't throw themselves in it. And sometimes that's because maybe they have, the getting to something, I don't know if we'll talk about or not, but that mental health piece is something that we really has really come into play the last probably 5, 6, 7 years. And there may be kids that huge crowds like that cause anxiety for them, and they don't go for that particular reason, or they go and don't do anything because they are so anxious. And it's something that I think I really didn't think about until probably the last 7 or 8 years, when kids have been more open about how they're feeling and about avoiding those type of situations because of how it made them feel. And it's not because they didn't want to go, it's because how they were feeling when they were there.
Yeah, you hit a lot of good points there, because just on your last one, the mental health thing, I've never had a hard time. Maybe when I was really young with expressing myself, expressing how I was feeling, or if I was upset or depressed or angry. I probably didn't have a hard time showing if I was angry, but if I was upset or anything, I didn't really think to show it. But definitely over the years, and especially where I am now, like especially what everyone's gone through the past couple of years, I definitely don't have a hard time talking about my feelings. I don't have a hard time expressing how I feel. I'll talk to my good friends about it and I'll hear them out. But I do know, I remember talking to my dad, like that wasn't a thing as much when he was young. Like it wasn't a big thing to deal with mental health and talk to therapists or psychiatrists, or it wasn't as big of an avenue as it is now.
Well, no, it definitely wasn't. I mean, I think your dad was around the same age as me, somewhere in that general area. And it certainly wasn't, we did not talk about how we felt, or if anybody was struggling with mental health. And there were some, obviously, because I lost some friends, I think, over the years, because of that. But, and it really, to be honest with you, it's only been really the last 7 to 10 years that it really, I mean, prior to that, it was better than what it had been. But I think for whatever reason, the last 7 to 10 years, and even the last 5 or 6, where kids are not afraid to come in and talk about whatever is going on in their life and how they're feeling about things, which is great, because obviously it's important to talk about those things.
Like my avenue when I was in high school, I don't know if I used my guidance teacher as much as I would now. Like the questions that I could have asked when I was in high school that I didn't and I would now is it might change where I am now. I wouldn't change where I am now for anything, but I don't think it was. I always looked at it as not a lot of people used the tool. People who really knew what they wanted to be, wanted to go to university and all that stuff, they use that tool. I kind of looked at it as like if I'm not going to university or I'm not going to school for 6 years to do something, why do I need to talk to someone about where I'm going to school or what career choices I have or what options I have? And I definitely, just you saying that, there is a big need for a guidance counselor. And it's not that I ever thought there wasn't. It's just that I never thought that it was my avenue to go to speak to one, just because I guess I always just thought that what I was wanting to be after school didn't need any guidance or didn't need any answers.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we in guidance have maybe done it not done as well, but also I think that they're trying to combat that in terms of saying, yeah, obviously the career piece, and unfortunately in the past, probably 20 years maybe out, maybe I think we've got better at that, but it was sort of the focus was on the university bound kid, maybe the college bound kid, but not the kid that wants to go in an apprenticeships or something like that. I know for me that kind of changed my thinking a number of years ago. I had kids come to me about really some obscure sort of things. One wanted to be a professional wrestler, so that was interesting. Trying not to be, being supportive of them.
Yeah.
But obviously it was kind of interesting. Another one, back when, kind of before you had the high end stereos, mass in vehicles and so on. I had a kid that wanted to do that, and we had just sort of got the internet and being able to use the internet as a tool. And even the wrestling one, the same thing, is that using it as a tool, I found that for the professional wrestling kid that wanted to be a wrestler, there were 10 or 12 wrestling schools, professional wrestling schools in our area. There, and then the kid that wanted to do the high end stereos, like install them and do that kind of stuff, found a place. I think it was in Toronto Hamilton area, and I believe I don't know what he's doing now, but I think he went on to work in Best Buy and end up becoming a manager of sort of that particular area, and they maybe branched out himself and so on. So that kind of stuff. It's the problem is getting that information out to the kids so they listen, because I mean I understand that's a tough thing in high school. I totally understand that, is that when you have somebody like me, blah blah blah, talking up there or whatever, you tune out, and it's just the way. Some, obviously there are kids that don't, but there are lots of kids that do, and sometimes, and I understand it too. I mean, it's getting across, there's so many multiple pathways, so many things that you might have dreams of what you want to do, and certainly hopefully you pursue those dreams as best you can. You may have to not do it in a certain area, that because of, you have to be realistic of, also, like some people say follow your dreams, which I do, but you also have to have a realistic perspective on that, because for example, if you want to be an engineer but you don't do well in math, well, that's probably not going to work for you. personally, I wanted to be a professional hockey player. Well, I wasn't good enough. So that's that's going to happen, right? I mean, it's just some kid wanted to be an NBA player and he's 5'6". Not to say there's been a couple guys like that, but not many, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just or you want to be a doctor, but you hate blood, right? I mean, those are some things, and but what I try to do is find a way around that. So find things that are um, sort of, or did, I shouldn't say do because I don't do that anymore. Um, uh, Try to find something in the same area. I had a former student who's now in town, and I think she's graduated 20 some years ago now. I wanted to be a physiotherapist, but she didn't have the really what she wanted. She didn't have the courses in order to do that, and the level. So we looked at, okay, well, what is something you can do that are similar? And it was massage therapy. So that's kind of the way I looked at it. But I think that that's important for students and to look at all avenues, right? I mean, don't be thinking just university, and unfortunately, that's kind of pushed on them a lot of times by parents, um, and or even schooling in general, right? I mean, obviously, the stats are good that people who go to college or university tend to do better, but doesn't mean that there isn't other ways of getting to where you want to go and doing things.
Yeah, and I guess that my mind always went straight to that if I was going to speak with one of the counselors or to the guidance counselors about my stuff, I always just thought it was related to careers, and that might have just been my own doing. Like I wasn't paying attention when they explained what you guys were for, or what we could handle with you guys, and what you guys could take care of. And in my mindset, I knew what I wanted to be at the beginning. I wanted to be a carpenter, and then I changed that to be an electrician. And I knew the trades is where I wanted to be. And I researched what I needed and the co-ops that I could take to make
Yeah.
getting into that field easier. But there is a lot of stuff that happened throughout school that, and maybe I wasn't as comfortable as a person to talk like I am right now. Like I don't think I was definitely a loud person in high school, but I don't think I was an outspoken to sit down and speak with someone about my feelings kind of guy. But if I
Right.
could have got myself there, it would have been a great avenue to choose. And I think this is true. I don't know how true it is, but is a teacher or a guidance counselor, are they not allowed to use social media?
Oh no, you can use social media. You have to be the because especially now, there a lot of teachers will have like a Twitter account, like a school Twitter account, or an Instagram, a club Instagram account, or so on. It is a touchy one in terms of if you have a personal like, be honest with you, mine were personal Instagram and Facebook, and it the teachers federations kind of discourage you from doing that, and reason is because you could end up getting in a situation where you said something that the student, because it's not like we're doing right now, it's a written thing, so in that sense it could be, so you have to be very careful, and I always tried to do that. I tried to be very careful, whatever students, usually it was, mostly with students who were graduates, students that graduated, or maybe were senior students, grade 12 students, or 13 back when we had 13, and so on. Of course, probably we didn't have social media back when there was grade 13, so it wasn't that. But and maybe students that I coached in different sports and so on. I have found that for me, again, you really have to be careful, and not everybody's comfortable with that. Is It has been a very good tool for me to be able to um, talk to students and get information as well. But it's not something that is sort of seen as necessarily a good thing in general, right? Because I think because you could get yourself in situations.
That's the aspect that I was looking for, because I remember being in high school, and obviously just out of curiosity, you'd Facebook your teacher's name or see if they had one. And I have
Yeah.
friends that are teachers now and relatives that are teachers, and they don't even use their last name because they don't want it to be as easy to find, just because they want to have that personal. It's very hard not to have social media nowadays. That's for sure. And I was just thinking of how good of a tool it would be when I was in high school, because everyone's always on their phones. They
Yeah.
read it quick, they're typing quick, they can get through stuff really quick. And if there was an avenue like that where I could see what certain aspects of guidance counseling was, or different sports that were offered, or whatever it may be. I use social media for a lot of stuff, and I use it in my job. Like, I use
Yeah.
LinkedIn
Yeah.
constantly.
Right.
Um, then again, I put myself back in high school, and I probably would have not read that stuff or not even clicked on that page to begin with. So who knows how much of a help it would have been, but that's just something I really want to touch on, because I don't remember teachers really having social media accounts. And even hearing you say that they have like Instagram accounts now for teams, and Facebook page, or private Twitters that are just for
Yeah.
like them for teaching, like that's an aspect that I don't remember that when I was in high school.
Yeah, I don't think there was. I mean, the thing, I think that in my particular case, I mean, maybe it was being naive, and fortunately, it never ever came to be an issue for me. But I think where I was in my career, um, how I felt I was perceived in terms of the people that I talked to and so on, it it didn't really concern me. Um, but you also, like, the thing is, I've been around for a long time. I some people don't even like living in the town that they teach in. Especially when you're younger, I mean, I understand that piece too, because you know what, you're young and you might do things. You might go to out somewhere and whatever. Right? Um, it's it for me. I found it. You know, the positives far outweighed the negatives. I mean, students in wherever jobs they were, which is for everywhere in town. I mean, you certainly get good customer service and treatment and perks and so on. I mean, it was always very good that way.
Yeah, that's definitely a part of the job that I didn't really think about. If I was a 26-year-old or 25-year-old being done teachers college or teachers university, and I was going to teach, that would be a hard aspect, living in the same town that you were teaching in, because you go out to the bar or to a restaurant and you're drinking with friends, and a student's there with their parents trying to get a meal. And that is a tougher aspect that I really didn't think about. One other thing that I really want to touch on, this is kind of a jump in subject, but you played some pretty competitive hockey when you were younger, did you not? Like, I don't know if you know this. My cousin is Mr. Partlow.
Yeah,
And I remember talking to him, and he said that you played junior for Delhi, correct?
yeah. Junior, I played a little bit of junior B, but mostly junior D. Had sort of made a decision that I went out for junior B. Could have probably made one of the teams, but it was iffy as how much I was going to play. Um, that was sort of a kick in the stomach, realizing, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. This is now, having looked back at it now, maybe I should have thought about it a bit more, and maybe looked at going sort of like a scholarship route or something like that. But that really didn't come into play too much back when I was at the time. There were kids that did, but not really too much. So it was sort of I decided to end up playing in my hometown in Delhi, and we had a really good team. Went to all Ontario finals, and most of those guys I'd played hockey with all along through minor hockey and so on. I often, we never won anything. No, we did when I was a novice, but we'd always were a very good team, but we didn't get very far. So that was very nice for that. And I was fortunate growing up. My parents were very supportive. Actually, I in grade 9. Maybe I'm talking too much about myself here, but I kind
No,
of
no, not at all.
didn't worry too much about school because I was a competitive swimmer. I was a competitive soccer player. Um, I played I played competitive hockey player. I played football. I did gymnastics. I did cross country. I did midget basketball,
Wow.
and this is all in like grade 9. So there were times when I was in grade 9ish, I believe it was, that I'd have a soccer game, a football game, and a hockey game potentially all the same day, which was not so great. So, and my knees have paid the price for it now. But you know what? That stuff really, and this is why I've always been big on extracurricular activities, whether it's a sport, whether it's a club, whether it's band, whether it's outside of a school, whether it's, you know, theater, whatever it is. To me, that stuff is equally, if not more important than the academic piece. Obviously, academics are important, because you have to have that to do most things. But those other things are what create you. What sort of define you, sort of determine who you are. You find out who you are and what kind of person you are. You learn all about yourself and about being a team player and being a leader and doing things the right way. Sometimes maybe not the right way, but you know, you
I
just
know that.
you just your cousin is Mr. Partlow too, by the way.
Good call.
He was a great hockey player. He could go both ways. He could do the fisticuffs and the actual playing the game. So I mean, did go on a scholarship, right? I mean, he was one of my first years actually, Mr. Partlow, in terms of he never played high school hockey for me because he was already doing some junior stuff. But him and Trevor Lamb actually did the clock for us when Mr. Robinson and I coached the boys hockey team. Yeah, so the extracurriculars in my mind, and this is where I try to get across to all kids, and it doesn't matter what it is, are hugely important. And you know what? It played itself out in my own kids. Their activities and the things that they were involved in were very important in terms of where they ended up because of their applications for things and what they needed to have. And they looked at those things. It wasn't just the academics they were looking at. It was the other things that they did in their lives, right, that were important. And
yeah, I agree with that completely. I didn't play a ton of high school sports. Like I went out for football. I was a little over 5 feet, maybe 5'3". I'm now
yeah.
5'9", but still at the time, like I was very skinny. I missed that aspect of it, but I was very thin and I went out for and I went out for football and I remember like going to the practices. I didn't play once. Actually, I went in one game because it was a guarantee that you would go in at least once.
Yeah.
And I went in and I replaced Connor Smith.
Yeah.
So they put me in as nose guard for one play, and I'm pretty sure that my head actually sacked the guy ahead of me. So it was like a legitimate sack. But that was I played high school baseball. When they brought baseball in, I was jumping for joy. I was so happy that baseball was finally a school sport, and that was in grade 11. And that year we went to off, so that was our first year having a baseball team. And yeah, Mr. Partlow, or I call him Mr. Partlow now in person. Because when I went to Annandale, that's when I first had him, and I had called him Derek a couple times in the hallway, and he finally pulled me aside. And he's like, "I know you're used to calling me that, but you got to call me Mr. Partlow." And now it's a habit.
You can't?
Now we're at Thanksgiving, and it's like Mr. Partlow. So, but yeah, I did hear that he did. Like I have heard many stories of how good of a hockey player he was, and he went to the States. I believe he played in Ohio.
Yeah. He's in the Hall of Fame there.
Yeah, we don't talk about that stuff around him. We don't bring it up. We don't we don't give him the platform.
You don't want to give his head too big. He's got a big head already.
Yeah, that's right. But he's the one that got a hold of me and recommended that I reach out to you. He has a lot of very, very good things to say about you, and he knows, like, did you guys hang out a lot? Like, he's a guidance teacher now, right?
Yeah, so he well, probably the last 5 years he was in guidance in some form or another, him and I. So there were a couple of years because of situations that it was just him and I. So yeah, I mean, I always have, even when he was a kid, would have talked to him. I mean, I'd followed along his his career, his junior career, and even in university, and then coming over to as a teacher in town in Annandale, and then coming over to Glendale. He's just him and I, and we both are huge Gretzky fans, so we just had this connection, and we have certainly different personalities in terms of how we see things at times, but we also see it a lot the same as well. And I think that it was nice in that sense that we kind of held each other accountable for how we do things, different ways, and questioned each other with that. So,
and I think in the guidance counseling roles, I think it's good to have two different kinds of people.
Oh, you have to. Yes, exactly. Because exactly for what you're saying. I mean, because there may be somebody who doesn't, and the other part is that it's nice that you have you have both male and female as well, because I think at times, females maybe only want to talk to females, although I've been very fortunate to have many, and partly I think was because I've coached girls teams over the years, but sometimes guys only want to talk to guys too, right? I mean, whatever it is. And I think that's changed as well to some extent. I think that many kids are, it doesn't really matter, but I mean, some it does. And I think it also gives you a different perspective on things too, right? When you have both genders as well, or I guess, sorry, there's more than one gender now, multiple, because that can happen. It does happen.
Yeah. I definitely see the aspect of having a female role and a male role there. And I definitely see having two different types of people with you and Mr. Partlow, just for the aspect, because if one person comes in and just doesn't click with you, or more believable doesn't click with Mr. Partlow. Just kidding. He's a good guy. I'm sure I'll hear about it later. But
yeah, that's right.
It is good for them to have another option. It is good for them to know that the one, or like to think that they only had that one option, and now they have no one to talk to, and no answers from anyone. And it's I remember when I started, Mrs. I'm gonna screw up her name. Fleet. Yeah. I couldn't remember her name, but I know I remember her face to a T. She was there when I first started Glendale.
Yeah.
And I believe she was one of the first ones I ever spoke to about anything. And I went to a woman, and you were a guidance counselor at the time, but weren't we assigned?
Yeah, you probably were by
grade,
by alphabet and grade.
Oh, alphabet. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say, because I don't know if I remember having a choice, but I know that if I wasn't happy with who I had, I would have been able.
You could have a choice. I mean, the guideline was for a guideline, just so that you wouldn't have one person having 900 kids.
100%. Yes, definitely. Which would have been you. But
honestly, I did have a lot, but it was fun, and I still do. Actually, I still get kids talking to me. I just was doing something yesterday with a student, so. But you know what? It's something I enjoy and still enjoy doing.
There's definitely a lot of people that you've impacted over the years, and one of the things that I just realized recently when I added you on Facebook is you got a message from Haley Wickenheiser.
Yeah.
That's sweet. That I've heard of Cameo. Is it Cameo?
Yeah.
I've heard of Cameo, and I've seen the possibilities with it. But your kids surprised you with that for Christmas.
They did. It was amazing. I mean, and she, they afterwards asked them, well, how did this all happen? So they told me. Firstly, I thought, oh, I mean, I was so good that I got this from Haley, but it was but they did a really good job in picking somebody for me who kind of encompassed a lot about me. I think the fact that she was a hockey player, a female hockey player, which I coach female sports, soccer, hockey, and ringette. My kids, 2 of the 3 kids were involved in female sport, but 2 involved in hockey. Mariah was just played hockey in high school, but she was a ringette player really, but Josh played hockey. That she's a doctor and going to be a doctor, just like my oldest daughter, Caitlin. That her family is a family of teachers, which myself and Mariah are. And that she's works for the Leafs. That she's probably, I would consider her. I know that there's some older female hockey players that some people call her the Gretzky, call them the Gretzky of female hockey, but I think I would consider Hayley Wickenheiser the Gretzky of female hockey.
I agree with that.
So, and the fact that she actually, what she said was very sincere, and the way she said it, and she took the time to sort of say a bunch of different things that they probably told her about, but they included. So from what I understand, that they've seen other ones from other people, and they just didn't do as good a job. So I mean, I think that it really did encompass it. It was a real shock and really touching.
It was night and day between, like, I had seen some just because when I heard it was a thing, I was like, who's on here and how much are they charging to get one of these videos?
Right.
And like, there's some people like Floyd Mayweather who's charging like $6,000 to get a 30-second clip of him. And it's like, not a chance. But with her, like, you were 100% right. Like, the points that she was hitting on and the stuff that she was talking about in your life and your retirement and where your kids are. And
yeah,
it was a sincere message. Like, it was almost as if she did do it. Like, I'm not surprised that you thought she did it herself.
Yeah, I know. It was like, so they did a really good job in finding a person that would to do it. First, to get that was really touching, but to get somebody that had the impact they did on me, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that your children came up with that. I do remember recently just seeing where they all are now. Like, I when you run into some knowing who your kids were, I knew that obviously they were going to amount to a lot, but seeing where some people are, it's just like, you were a completely different person in high school, but you, like, Mariah's a teacher, Josh is an engineer, and Caitlin's almost a doctor. Like, she's in New York right now.
Yes. She's got 2 months left and she'll be considered a doctor. Yeah.
I'm sure she'll be happy to come home.
Yeah. She loves it there. She
really
loves. Yeah. So she actually will likely end up being, she's doing interviews for what they call residency, which is the next step, and not in Canada at all, because basically they don't really take them, or if they do, it's really hard to get. So she'll probably end up either in New York again, or Connecticut, or Pennsylvania somewhere, or Ohio.
Good for her. Like, I know I've seen a couple of your posts just about Mariah and the way that she's teaching and the way that she's just grabbing everything she can to change the way people are learning on Zoom. Luckily, with her age group, she understands a little more on how to use a computer. I'm sure there's some older teachers that are still teaching that are probably having a harder time with this whole Zoom concept and what people can see and what people can't see. And you gotta, obviously you're a very humble person, but good for you. Like, you've raised 3 amazing adults, and I can't believe, like, how long has Caitlin been there? Was she there for the beginning of the pandemic?
Oh yeah, she was. She's actually been in New York for 2 years. So she, when the pandemic started, so mid-March, so we had to get her out of there, because they wanted all Canadians to come back, and it was bad there. She went, and they didn't have PPE and all that kind of stuff for the students. So she ended up coming back in mid-March, and then she went back mid-June. So she's been back since mid-June. So she'll be done at the end of March, her MD, and then come home for a couple months, and then she'll be going wherever she ends up. She'll find out in mid-March where that is.
Is she in New York, New York?
She lives in Brooklyn. Yep. So she can go anywhere in New York in 20 minutes. She knows how to navigate it all. So
which is gotta be, like, I remember hearing about New York as a kid. You watch Home Alone in New York. Like,
yeah,
I've never been to New York. I've heard good things, and I've heard that there's obviously everywhere has their bad spots. But like, for her to be there when she was, like, that's a life experience right there. Like, they brought in like a Navy ship to help with people who were getting COVID and people that were in beds. And that's a crazy time to be studying to become a doctor during a global pandemic.
And the street she's on is called Flatbush. And it's actually, she's only about 5 minutes from the Barclays Center, which is where, like, the hockey, well, the Islanders don't play there anymore, but basketball plays there and so on. Of course, not a lot going. You can't do much right now, but it's also a main street where they have a lot of things going on. So when there were a lot of the protests that were going on, Black Lives Matter and stuff, also excitement when the election happened and Trump was booted out because New York is not fond of Trump. And all that stuff. So she's seen a lot of stuff. And even in the hospital she's in it's a public hospital. So you see, it's not it's not the wealthy people that are coming in there. It's people that are, and she also worked in an HIV clinic and some really neat stuff, like interesting stuff that she's seen over years. So she's lived quite the life already. I mean, she's been in England, she's been in New York, and she's been in Grenada for her training to be a doctor.
And you can't put a price on that experience. I'm sure the price, regardless, isn't cheap. Yeah, I figured that was coming, but
yeah.
But regardless, like when she's done,
no, it's true.
It's
the cost financially, yes, has been pretty extensive, but the experience that she's got in obviously the schooling piece, but also just where she's been able to go and live and travel to just to be part of her schooling has been amazing.
Yeah, and Mariah is a teacher, which I could definitely see. She was very outgoing and outspoken and bubbly, and wasn't afraid to speak. Or that's at least that's the aspect I got from her.
No, that's great. She's an awesome teacher, a great young teacher. It makes me proud that she's followed that path. Something I knew that she would do. She didn't realize it until little later than what I thought, but that's okay. She figured it out. And Josh he works for an engineering firm in London, so he followed a path which surprises us because like Caitlin was pretty good at math, and Mariah could do math too, but I'm not a math guy, and obviously if you're an engineer, you got to be a math guy.
See, I don't know if any of my subjects were great in high school, but I do remember liking math. I'm not going to say I did the homework or.
It is to like math, right?
Sorry?
I mean, math is important. It's good to like math.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
It's unfortunately there's some of us that it really does not work for us very well. And I think some of it, you bring it on yourself, right? It's like a phobia. I used to call it, I had a math phobia because I'd get all freaked out before it even started. Like this is in high school, right? I mean, I could probably do the stuff. I just would get myself all worked up about it because I would think I couldn't do it. And people do that for and other things too, right? So
yeah, my fiance does that. Like I'll ask her a question and it's definitely one that she can answer, but just the anxiety of answering the question or thinking about it or getting it wrong, she's just like, nope, I'm not doing it. And then if you gave it to her to sit down in front of for 5 seconds, she would do it. And like I remember taking physics with
Mr. T.
Mr. T. I couldn't remember. I kept thinking of Tanton from Annandale.
DeValis.
Yeah. Mr. T. And I remember taking, like, we got to the physics aspect and I knew I wanted to be an electrician and I wanted to focus so bad. And where my head was at in high school, I was not meant to learn at that time for some reason. And I left college or high school, ended up going to Conestoga for 2 years for electrical engineer technician. And I did vectors and SOHCAHTOA, and every single day I did calculations on voltage and current and it's crazy how I couldn't do it then, but with some proper determination and where I wanted to be in my career, doing school for electrical was easy compared to going to high school.
That's a good point though, because I think that as part of learning and being able to learn, you have to be in the right space. You have to, and there's a maturity level, and I don't mean maturity meaning to be mature, not be silly or whatever. I mean maturity in terms of being able to learn. So I'll give you an example of that I had myself in high school is that I took grade 13 biology and grade 12. Well, grade 13 biology, you would probably know of grade 12 biology, Mrs. Hopper taught, which is very, very tough course, great teacher, but there's a lot in there, and you have to be in the right space for that. You need to be mature. You need to mature learner. You need to be able to work hard and do the things you need to do. And I wasn't that when I took grade 13 biology in grade 12, and I didn't pass it. So I ended up having to take it over again when I was in grade 13, and I did fine. I mean, I did retake it, but I was just in a better place. And the same thing happened in university. I think that in my years at university, I didn't apply myself as well as I could have. It's disappointing to myself now looking at it, but I ended up doing really well in the end in teachers college and stuff like that. But you look at that and sometimes you're just not there, right? And it's unfortunately it's something has to switch on you in order for you to get to that. And if you don't, then it's not going to happen.
Like I remember in high school I wanted to be a carpenter, and I did well in all of Mr. I can't remember any of their names.
Mink.
Yes, I knew it was an M.
Mr.
Mink's.
He almost got me because it's been a few years now since he's been retired. So,
and I remember focusing in his class, and I made my little table, my side table. I made my Adirondack chair, and I did really well. And I still have both of those things. And it was just like it was a switch of something I wanted to do, not something I had to do, which a lot of that changed in college because there was a lot of maths and electronics and robotics that I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to, and I knew I spent a lot of money to be there. And that switch was huge for me when I went to college for maturing. And like I was far from mature in high school, but when you talk about aspects of like taking the different sciences and you really have to be there in that mindset to be able to do them. I only took physics, but my best man at my wedding is Grant Robinson. He almost failed his dad's class. So you definitely
be the first one.
You definitely have to be there mentally to do the work and be able to put the time in to get out what you're needed to out of the subject, for sure.
And that's good segue there, because that really is about life, right? You need to be in the right frame of mind in order to do whatever it is, whether it's doing what you're going to be doing whenever you can, and that is getting married. And now obviously you've probably been together for a number of years, so that piece is you've worked on that already. But I mean, there's all kinds of things like with jobs, careers, your own personal health, whether it be, for example, myself, physical health, or people with their mental health, especially now. And if you have a problem, you need to get that help. And if you're not in the right spot for that, that's when it becomes difficult to get help, right? Because people know that you need help or try to get you help, but if you're not there, then, and that doesn't necessarily mean it can be mental health. It could be other things. It could be something physically, like maybe you could be have a health issue that if you don't do something about it, right? And honestly, that's sort of kind of where I was at. I had a family history of heart issues, and if I was going down this path that I could be in trouble. So, and who knows what the future holds, but at least I control some of it, right?
That's right. This has been awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better guest, and I really appreciate you coming on here over the past couple of days since I've known I've wanted to do this, and the people I've reached out to just get some opinions on stuff. There's definitely not a person that I've ever spoken to that has anything bad to say about you. I remember seeing you in high school. You were the most bubbly person. You were definitely the most spirited person when it came to giving your all for the students and putting everything you had into every event that we ever had. And it definitely showed, and it definitely left an impact. It definitely left an impression on me for you putting everything you had into everything you did. And I really didn't have you a lot in high school. I wasn't in really much of the sports you were in. I didn't have you as a guidance counselor, but it definitely didn't go unnoticed. Just like you said, with you showing up at, I did wrestling for a little while, you showing up at the school hockey games, the school football games, maybe show up at the baseball field, and everyone thanks you for your 36 years, the amount of kids' lives that you've impacted and the changes that you've made. There's really no words that anyone can say, but I just want to say genuinely that everyone thanks you for everything you did at Glendale.
Well, thanks, Greg. I really appreciate you you doing this. It's been a pleasure, and you should be proud of yourself. I know your family should be proud of you and where you've come. Um, you know, I mean, you look back to your high school, and I know what you were like, and you weren't a bad kid. You just were a little spirited.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And school really at the time wasn't your focus, right? So, and I understand that. There's a lot of kids are like that, but you've done amazing things. Your dad would be proud of you. I know he's proud of you, and the rest of your family as well. So, it's been a real pleasure, and it's nice seeing young people come to where they're at, and you've done amazing things.
I really appreciate
Good luck with
that.
this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a learning curve for sure. There's definitely a lot of nerves that come with it at the beginning, but when I first start and we start chatting, it kind of goes away and it makes it easy. And you're a very easy person to speak to. You keep the conversation going really well, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your night to do this.
Well, thank you. Good luck, and I look forward to it broadcasting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. Have a great night.
Take care.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.